If you've entered the USA on a K-1 visa and are applying for adjustment of status, I thought I'd create a step-by-step tutorial on how to fill out your I-485 adjustment of status form, as well as show you how to assemble your entire adjustment of status packet with all the supporting documents and forms in order to obtain your green card from USCIS. Our green card was approved in only 5 months with no interview needed. So I wanted to cover so much information so that you can easily submit your application correctly and accurately to avoid receiving a request for evidence or, even worse, a rejection. Hopefully this video will cover everything you need from start to finish in order to submit your adjustment of status application with USCIS. I'll include chapters in the description box so you can skip to the relevant part you wish to watch, as USCIS only provides basic guidelines and there is no specific method of assembling the adjustment of status packet. We did a lot of research in order to make sure we covered everything that would be required. In this video, I'll cover how to fill out the I-485 adjustment of status form, as well as the I-864 Affidavit of Support form, which is additionally required to file for adjustment of status. I'll cover page by page how to assemble your entire packet, including all the proof and evidence of supporting documents that you need to include. I'll show you all the cover letters that you need, and I'll show you how to pay and where to specifically mail your application, as it is state dependent, and include as many tips as I can throughout the video to ensure your application is approved successfully. Furthermore, if you're including the optional I-765 work authorization and I-131 travel authorization forms, I'll show you how to assemble your packet to include the supporting documents for those forms too. We initially struggled trying to find the perfect order to organize it all, so I truly hope that this helps, and I'll leave a link to our downloadable template for this form in the description box, as well as any links mentioned in this video. Just as a note, this is how we filled out the application as 2 individuals who have never been married before. Neither of us have children nor any criminal records. So you may want to adjust your form and documents that you are submitting accordingly if anything different applies to you. Let me begin with how to fill out the I-485 form. Just remember to make sure that you're using the most recent up-to-date version of the form, as well as type or print in black ink. So we're going to start here where it says A number, and you're going to enter your alien number, which is found on your NOAA 2 Notice of Action. It's hidden away over here where it says beneficiary name, so you can just enter that number here in this field. And as you can see, it asks you to enter this number on every page on the top right-hand corner. So I would make sure you fill this out beforehand. A tip is to make sure to use this A number on any supplementary documents for additional evidence as well. Part 1, information about the beneficiary, i.e. the non-American citizen. So question 1 asks for your current legal name, and this is the name of the beneficiary, i.e. the non-US citizen. So in my case, it would be my husband. So I typed in his last name here, his first name here, and as he doesn't have any middle names, I wrote NA. I put NA instead of leaving any spaces blank, just to let USCIS know that I have not unintentionally or accidentally left this blank. Question 2 asks other names you have used since birth. This wasn't relevant for us, so we put NA. However, let's say you're the non-US citizen and you're the female who's changing her name. In question 1, you can put your new married name, which is the name you're taking from your husband. And here in question 2, you can write your pre-married maiden name, which was your name before marriage, even if you haven't legally changed it yet. A lot of people question, which name should I use? My married name or my previous maiden name? And honestly, as you're going to be including your marriage certificate as supporting evidence, you can use either or. as USCIS will be able to make the connection that you have gotten married on a K-1 visa and that you're filling this in as your new married name. Question 3 asks your date of birth, so just remember it's the month, day, and year in that format. It also asks, have you ever used any other date of birth? We wrote no. If you answered yes, there's a space to fill in any other information. We wrote NA. On page 2, remember to include your A number here at the top. Question 4 asks, do you have an alien registration number? So we clicked yes, and we entered our A number here, which again is found on your NOAA 2. Question 5 asks, have you ever used or been assigned any other A number? In our case, it's no, as my husband has never had one before, so we wrote NA. Question 6 asks gender, so we put down male. Question 7 asks for their place of birth, so we wrote down the city, which is London, the country of birth, United Kingdom, and country of citizenship or nationality, which is where he immigrated from, and again, we put down United Kingdom. Question 9 asks for a USCIS online account number, and we wrote NA. You won't actually have one yet. You'll get a USCIS online account number after submitting this form to USCIS. And they'll send you another NOAA 1 notice of action. And this will have instructions on how to set up an online account with USCIS, and they'll provide you an online account number. Question 10 asks about their recent immigration history. So it asks for the passport or travel document number used at last arrival, and this is the passport number. It then asks the expiration date of the passport. Again, we filled that in with the month, the day, and the year. It asks the country that issued the passport, so we put down United Kingdom as it's from the United Kingdom. It then asks the non-immigrant visa number used during the most recent arrival. And this is found on your K-1 visa in red writing. It then asks the date the non-immigrant visa was issued, and this will be under the issue date on the K-1 visa. The next question is the place and date of the last arrival into the United States. So my husband entered in Orlando, Florida, and so this is the city of his first point of entry. So let's say that we had connecting flights and our final destination was California. Then we would still put down Orlando, as this is the first city that he entered into the United States. And then it asks for the date of the last arrival, which is the day that he entered. For question 11, it asks when you last arrived into the United States. Again, this is still information about the beneficiary, the non-US citizen. You're going to check the first box. I was inspected at a port of entry and admitted as a K-1 fiance visa. We then put NA for the other two boxes. On page 3, again, remember to type in or write in your A number. Question 12 asks if you were issued a Form I-94. Provide the information from your most recent I-94. So I'm going to put my beneficiary's last name and first name, and then I'm going to enter his I-94 arrival departure record number. So to get this record number, you're going to log on to the I-94 CBP website. Once on the CBP website, you'll click on Get Most Recent I-94. You'll fill out the beneficiary's information here on this page, and then you should see the most recent I-94. The arrival departure record number will be displayed here. It asks for your expiration date, which again can be found on your I-94. So we wrote that here. And then for immigration status on Form I-94, we wrote K1. Question 13 asks, was your last arrival the first time you were physically present in the United States? We wrote no because my husband has been in the United States to visit me before. However, you would check yes if it is your first time entering the USA. Question 14 asks, what is your current immigration status if it has changed since your last arrival? So we just wrote NA. And question 15 asks the expiration date of your current immigration status, which is the same date written on your I-94. So you can see that we wrote the same date. Question 16 asks, have you ever been issued an alien crewman visa? So we wrote no, and this is basically if you've been issued a C1D visa, which is primarily for people who work on a cruise ship. So if you have worked on a cruise ship and been issued this visa, you can click yes. But for the majority, I'm going to assume it's no. And in our case, it was no. Similarly, question 17 asks, did you last arrive in the United States to join a vessel as a seaman or crewman? And we checked no, as we entered on a K1 visa. Question 18 asks for your current US physical address. So that's the address where you'll be living, which is more than likely going to be the same as the US petitioner. So I wrote down my husband's name and our current address, the city, the state, and the zip code. It then asks the date you first resided at this address. So we just wrote down the day of his arrival into the US, as this was his first time living at this address. The next question is this your mailing address? So we checked yes. We put NA for any alternative address, as we are going to reside here and this is our only mailing address. On page 4, once again, remember to write down your A number. The first question asks, have you resided at your current address for at least 5 years? So we check no, as my husband has only just moved to the US. As we answered no, we had to provide prior addresses that he's lived at for the last 5 years. So we wrote down his name, his street name, and address that he was living at in the United Kingdom. And we wrote the date from and the date till, which was pretty much the day he left the UK to come to the US. If you need more space to write more addresses, you can use the last page for additional information. To use this page, you need to reference the question you are answering. So you'll type in page 4, part 1, and that this is item or question number 18. As my husband has only ever lived in one address, we wrote NA for the next question. You can leave this section blank if it's the same as above. Question 19 is in relation to their Social Security card. So it asks, has the Social Security Administration ever officially issued a Social Security card to you? So you can select no if you have never been issued a Social Security card. If you have had one before, you can click yes. Now, your Social Security number will always be the same, so it won't change even if you're entering on a new visa. In our case, Suraj has been issued a Social Security card before and a Social Security card number, so we type that in here. The next question asks, do you want the Social Security Administration to issue you a Social Security card? And we checked yes. So what they do is issue you a new Social Security card. His previous Social Security card had the words "not authorized for employment" on it. But as you're applying for a green card, this new Social Security card will have no restrictions on it. So if a potential employer asks to see your Social Security card, there won't be any discrepancies regarding it. We then checked yes for the next box, which is just the consent for disclosure. Page 5, Part 2. So question 1 asks, are you filing for adjustment of status with the Executive Office for immigration review while in removal, exclusion, or deporting proceedings? You're going to check no, as this doesn't apply to us. Question 2 asks for the receipt number of your underlying petition. And this is your WAC number that you received with the original I-129F petition, which should be on your NOAA 1. And the priority date is your NOAA 1 date. So ours was, for example, May the 2nd, 2024. The next question asks, who am I filing this I-485 form as? And you're going to select Principal Applicant. You can write NA for this next section, as you're only filling it out if you had checked the derivative applicant box. Question 3A asks, under which category are you applying? So you're only going to check this one, which is person admitted to the United States as a fiance or child of a fiance of a U.S. citizen K1, K2 non-immigrant. So we can completely skip page 6 as we've already filled out question 3A. Page 7, again, doesn't really apply to us. Just remember to fill in your A number at the top here. So for 3D, we left that blank and just wrote NA in the empty fields. For 3G, we wrote NA and continued on to page 8. On page 8, part 3, the question asks, I am requesting an exemption from submitting an affidavit of support because, and you're going to select box 1F. None of these exemptions apply, as it's mandatory for us to submit a proof of financial support. I, as the petitioner, I'm going to financially support my beneficiary immigrating to the USA, and I'm going to show you how to fill out the I-864 proof of financial support form later in the video. Part 4 asks, have you ever applied for an immigrant visa to obtain permanent residence status at a U.S. embassy or U.S. consular abroad? You're going to select no. You may be confused, but you'll select no because we only filled out the DS-160, which is for non-immigrant visa applicants. As we selected no in question 1, we do not need to answer questions 2 through 4. Question 5 asks, have you previously applied for permanent residence while in the United States? So we check no. And question 6, we check no as it does not apply to us. Question 7 asks about the beneficiary's employment and education history. So it's asking for all of your employment and education history for the last 5 years. So on question 7, we filled out the employer, which is Amazon UK, and we wrote down his occupation as data analyst. And you're filling this out for your most recent employer. On the next page, we typed in the address of the employer and included the start date and the end date. Question 8 allows you to write your second most recent employer. So we filled that out with the company name, his occupation, the address of the employer, as well as the start and end date of my beneficiary's employment. If you do need more space, you can always use the last sheet of paper for additional information. Just remember to write down that it's page 9, part 4, and a continuation of item number 8. Part 5 asks information about the beneficiary's parents. So question 1, we wrote down my husband's father's last name, his first name, and wrote NA for the middle name. Question 2 asks for parent 1's name at birth if different than above. So we just wrote NA. We then wrote my beneficiary's father's date of birth in question 3. And on the next page, for question 4, it asks for their country of birth. So we wrote United Kingdom. Question 5 then asks information about parent number 2. So for question 5, we wrote down my husband's mother's last name and her first name, and we wrote NA for the middle name. Then similarly as above, for question 6, we just wrote NA as she doesn't have any other names. For question 7, we wrote her date of birth. And for question 8, we wrote her country of birth. Just as a note, if you do not know your parent's name or they've passed away, you can just write deceased or unknown in these fields. Part 6 is information about your marital history. So question 1 asks, what is your current marital status? So you're going to select married, as you're now filling out this form after you've been married. Question 2 asks, if you are married, is your spouse a current member of the U.S. Armed Forces or U.S. Coast Guard? I am not, so we selected no. Question 3 asks, how many times have you been married? So we selected 1, as this is both of our first marriages. The next section asks information about your current marriage. So question 4 asks your current spouse's legal name. So now this is going to be the U.S. citizen. So for instance, in our case, I wrote my last name, my first name, and typed in NA for middle name. It then asks for the spouse's A number. I, the U.S. citizen and petitioner, am a U.S. citizen, so I do not have an A number. Question 6 asks for the petitioner's date of birth. And question 7 asks for the country of birth, which is United States. Question 8 asks for the U.S. petitioner's current address. So I filled that out here with the name, apartment number, the city, the state, the zip code, and the country, which is the United States. The next page, page 11, part 6, asks for information about your marital history continued. And question 9 asks place of marriage to your current spouse. So we got married in a town called Marathon here in Florida in the United States, and we wrote down our date of marriage here. Question 10 asks, is your current spouse applying with you? So you're going to select no, as it is only the non-US citizen beneficiary who is applying for a green card and residency. Next, the form asks information about prior marriages, if any. In our case, this is our first marriage, so we filled out the rest of the page with NA. But if you have been married before, you will need to fill out this section. Page 12, part 7, is information about your children. Question 1 asks, indicate the total number of all living children anywhere in the world, including adult sons and daughters that you have. In our case, we wrote none, as neither of us have any children. If you do have children, you would fill this section out here. If your application does include a K2, you would fill out question 2 with their name and information. And also check the box that says yes, this child is also applying now on a separate I-485 form. Part 8 asks for the biographic information about the beneficiary, the non-US citizen. So for question 1, you're going to select their ethnicity. It asks Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. Question 2 asks their race. Question 3 asks their height in feet and inches. Question 4, you're going to enter their weight in pounds. For question 5, eye color, you're going to select only one of the boxes within this list. And similarly, for question 6, you're going to select their hair color from the below list and only select one box. Part 9 begins a whole bunch of security questions. So question 1 asks, have you ever been a member of, involved in, or in any way associated with any organization, association, fund, foundation, party, club, society, or similar group in the United States or in any other location in the world? We selected no. As we selected no, we just wrote NA in all of the boxes under Organization 1 and Organization 2, and then we continued on to the next page. So this section asks a lot of security questions, such as, have you ever been denied admission to the United States or denied a visa? I would suggest reading these very carefully and checking either yes or no in accordance to your situation. I don't believe there are any trick questions here. They are fairly basic yes or no questions. Just be careful. For example, you're only answering questions 20 and 21 if you answered question 19. So I would just read these questions carefully. Again, question 22 is another security question on this page, so we selected no. Here is page 15, and as you can see in our answers, we read through them and just selected either yes or no, or left some items blank that weren't actually relevant to us. We did the same here for page 16. And once again here for page 17. Part 9 asks about the public charge and ground of inadmissibility. As K-1 visa applicants, we are not exempt from the public charge ground of inadmissibility. So for question 56, we check the box on page 19, which is I do not fall under any of the exempt categories listed above, and will complete items number 57 to 66. As we check this box, we now need to complete items number 57 to 66. So question 57 asks, what is the size of your household? So we wrote down 2, as it's just the 2 of us. Question 58 asks for your annual household income. And this is just the petitioner's income, as my husband cannot work in the USA yet. So I checked what my household income is. Question 59 asks to identify the total value of your household assets. So I checked the box that's relevant to my assets as well as the value of my assets. And question 60 asks to identify the total value of your household liabilities. So I selected what was relevant to me. Question 61 asks, what is the highest degree or grade of school you have completed? So this goes back to the beneficiary, non-US citizen, the applicant on this form. So my husband selected bachelor's degree. Question 62 asks you to list any certification, licenses, or skills. You can put whatever is relevant. If you have a skill or something like first aid, but we just selected NA as it's not really relevant to our petition. Question 63 asks, have you ever received supplemental security income or temporary assistance for needy families? So we just selected no. Question 64 asks, have you ever received long-term institutionalization at government expense? So we selected no. Question 65 relates to any benefits received, so we just typed in NA. And for question 66, we also typed in NA. Question 67 begins a string of yes or no security questions as before. So I suggest reading these thoroughly and answering what is relevant to your specific case. But we checked the no boxes as none of these apply to us. Similarly, for page 21, we read through these and checked what was relevant to us and primarily selected no. Page 22, part 10, asks for the applicant's contact information. So question 1 asks for the telephone number. So if your beneficiary doesn't have a phone number yet, you can always put the petitioner's number here. So for question 1, we wrote down my husband's telephone number. And on question 3, we wrote down his email address. Question 4 then requires a signature. So just remember, when you print this form out, this signature must be signed by hand. And remember to sign this form, otherwise your application will be rejected. And next to it, we just typed out today's date. Part 11 relates to an interpreter. As we're filling out this form by ourselves, we didn't have an interpreter or use an interpreter, so we just filled out the rest of the fields as NA. Similarly, on page 23, we just filled out NA. For part 13, it says do not complete part 13 as it's for the USCIS officer to fill out at your interview. Just as a note, we did not go through an interview at all. Our case was approved automatically after mailing our application to USCIS. Page 24 is the final page, which is part 14, additional information. Just remember to fill out your name and a number on this page, even if you aren't using this form for any additional information. Let me now show you how to assemble your adjustment of status packet from start to finish, which includes this form that we've just filled out, plus the supplementary evidence that is required for it. This is exactly how we assembled our very own adjustment of status packet, and I'm using the actual template that we created and sent off to USCIS. All contents from here onwards are how they appear in order within the packet. So let's scroll to the very top of the page. So the I-485 form is mandatory in order to obtain your green card, and you must complete and submit this form and submit it to USCIS if you wish to live in the USA legally. The cost of this form as of today's date is $1,440, and I'll go through how to pay and mail it off to USCIS towards the end of the video. As I mentioned, all documents are as they appear in order of our packet that we sent off to USCIS. As you'll see, we compiled everything into one large document, printed it, and at the end clipped together with one large binder clip. We didn't use separate folders or create anything fancy with different folders. We just wanted to keep our packet as simple as possible for USCIS, and therefore printed title pages, each labeled with the relevant form title, as well as the name and a number of the applicant, as you can see on the screen. So as you can see, it is titled Form I-485, Adjustment of Status and Supporting Documents. According to the guidelines, it's useful to list the applicant's name and a number on the pages in case they get lost or misplaced, which is why we made sure we included it on every single page that we submitted. The next page is our cover letter. Feel free to use this as guidance for your own application, and we've highlighted aspects that need to be changed to suit your own application. This page contains absolutely everything you need to include for the adjustment of status packet and is written with the correct formatting USCIS mentions in their guidelines. We ensured the words I-485 cover letter were visible in the left-hand corner. On the right-hand corner, you'll write the applicant's name, a number, address, and contact information, as well as today's date. We then included the USCIS mailing address that we sent our application to. To find out where to mail your application, you're going to go onto the USCIS website and find the lockbox filing location chart for family-based forms. Here, they provide a list of addresses depending on which state you're based in. So for example, we mailed our form via USPS to the Chicago lockbox because we're based in Florida. Next, we highlighted that this is the original submission of Form I-485 to adjust status of an immediate relative of a U.S. citizen. We stated, here's a list of contents included in the order in which they appear in the packet. As an FYI, USCIS does prefer the check at the front of your packet. As you can see, we also included the Form I-864 in the contents page, as it's required to be submitted with the Form I-485, proof that your spouse can financially support you. And it includes its own list of supporting evidence. Furthermore, there is a section for additional documents, which shows proof of our marriage, including photos and joint documents together. We really took a lot of care when writing this cover letter in ensuring we listed every item that is required, as well as providing detail to what we're including. At the bottom of the page, we sign this page by the applicant. Next, we have the G1145 form, which is downloadable on the USCIS website. By completing this form, It allows you to receive notifications by text and email in regards to your application. We received a text from USCIS when our application was received by USCIS. It took approximately 1 week to receive a text from USCIS that they had received our case and also included our receipt number within the message. Here is our I-485 application form that we filled out, so I'll just scroll past this. Now we move on to the supporting evidence you need to provide for your I-485 form. And once again, this is just a continuation of everything in order of what we compiled together. First is the applicant's passport page. On the top of every page, we included my husband, the applicant's name and A number, as well as a short title to describe the document that we're submitting. For example, copy of passport biographic page. Next is the beneficiary's birth certificate. And of course, these are all just scanned copies, and we stated this in the title as USCIS does not require the original documents. Next is a copy of his Social Security card. Of course, you may not have one, so just amend your adjustment of status packet accordingly. We then included a copy of the I-94, which was downloaded from the original I-94 CBP website. Again, all these documents are required by USCIS along with your I-485 form as supporting evidence. And as you can see, we've clearly titled the supporting evidence we're submitting. It was our intention to submit everything as organized as possible to make our application as easy to read and process for USCIS. We then have a copy of the K-1 visa with a stamp of admission. On the next page is our copy of the NOAA 2. We followed our NOAA 2 along by our NOAA 1 as well. Next is a copy of the K-1 FTP NVC letter for the I-129F petition. We then included a certified copy of the marriage certificate. Again, this is essential to include within your application. We made sure we got multiple certified copies of our marriage certificate as we knew we'd need to submit this as well as use it for other things such as name changes or merging bank accounts. From my research, I heard USCIS accepts photocopies, but again, we just wanted to be thorough and avoid RFEs. So we just decided to submit a certified copy in order to be thorough. Next, we included photos from our wedding ceremony, and we stated the date on the title too. We then included a cover letter stating that here is proof that we've already undertaken a medical exam in my husband's home country, and that another one is not required according to USCIS guidelines, and that we are submitting the DS3025 vaccination worksheet, which is what was provided after undertaking a medical exam back in my beneficiary's home country. USCIS constantly keeps changing their requirements, so I would read what is required during the time of your application. But let me summarize what USCIS requires. According to their guidelines, if you completed a full medical with all your vaccinations properly complete, you can submit your DS3025 vaccination worksheet to USCIS and don't need to submit the I-693 form, as K-1 applicants have already undergone a medical exam. However, if your medical exam was incomplete in your home country and you haven't met the requirements or received all vaccinations, then you'll need to find a USCIS approved civil surgeon and complete your I-693 form and submit that along with your application. From my research, USCIS seemed to misplace a lot of people's medical records or just simply send an RFE, making you redo the medical exam. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason, but if they send you an RFE, then more than likely it'll end with you having to redo your medical exam. But don't panic, because it does not mean a rejection. Here is a copy of the DS3025 vaccination documentation worksheet. And this is what was provided after undertaking a medical exam back in my beneficiary's home country. If you don't have this form, you'll need to fill out the I-693 Report of Immigration Medical Examination and Vaccination Record form. Here is part 2 of that form. Just as a guide, here's how you can create a title page for your I-693 Medical Examination form. The next page is our cover page for the I-864 Affidavit of Support form. Again, this is just a continuation of our Adjustment of Status packet, considering that proof of financial support is a requirement. We included the principal applicant's A number and name on this form, even though this form is predominantly filled out by the petitioner or U.S. citizen. Here we have page 1 of the form, and this form is predominantly filled out by the U.S. citizen. Just to clarify for this form, the sponsor is the U.S. citizen, and the principal immigrant is the beneficiary, i.e. the non-U.S. citizen. So let me show you how we filled out our I-864 form. On page 1, part 1, the basis of filing the affidavit of support, it asks, I am the sponsor submitting this affidavit of support because, and we selected box 1A. I am the petitioner. I filed or am filing for the immigration of my relative, i.e., I'm filing on behalf of my now husband. Part 2 continues to ask information about you, the sponsor, i.e. the U.S. citizen. So for question 1, I wrote my last name, my first name, and just wrote NA for middle name as it doesn't apply. On page 2, part 2, question 2, it asks for my current mailing address. So I entered my name, my street address, the city I live, the state, the zip code, and selected country as United States. Question 3 asks, is your current mailing address the same as your physical address? As it is, I check the yes box. If you do answer no, then you can fill out question 4 with your physical address, which is where you reside. Question 5 asks my country of residence, which is United States. Question 6 asks for my date of birth. And question 7 asks for my country of birth, which is United States. Question 8 asks for my U.S. Social Security number, so I filled that out here. Question 9 asks for my immigration status. I was born in the United States, so I checked I am a U.S. citizen. And I wrote NA for question 10 and 11, as I do not have an A number nor a USCIS online account number. Question 12 asks if I am currently on active duty in the United States Armed Forces or U.S. Coast Guard, so I check no. Part 3 asks information about the principal immigrant. So once again, that is my husband, the non-U.S. citizen who is my beneficiary. So for question 1, I filled out his last name, his first name, and wrote NA for middle name. Question 2 asked for his mailing address, which is our address, so I filled out the street number and name, the city, which is Orlando, the state, Florida, our zip code, and country is United States. Question 3, which is other information, it asks for his country of citizenship or nationality. So I wrote down United Kingdom, as this is where he is from. Question 4, I wrote down his date of birth. Question 5 asks for his A number, alien registration number, which can be found on your NOAA 2. And question 6 asks for his USCIS online account number. And once again, you'll receive this online account number after submitting these forms to USCIS. Question 7 asks for his phone number, and if your beneficiary doesn't have a phone number, you can just put down your number for the time being. Part 4 asks information about the immigrants you are sponsoring. So I checked the yes box for I am sponsoring the principal immigrant named in Part 3. Question 4, where it asks family member 1, you do not need to fill out as you've already entered the information above. So we just wrote NA. On page 4, where it asks family member 2, 3, and 4, we just typed in NA as it does not apply to us. Part 5 asks for the sponsor's household size. So question 1 asks for the number of persons you are sponsoring in this affidavit. It asks you to enter the number of immigrants that you are sponsoring, which includes the principal immigrant listed in Part 3. So I wrote 1, as I am sponsoring just my husband or beneficiary. It then asks persons not sponsored in this affidavit. So for question 2, I wrote down number 1, as I am not sponsoring myself. And then for question 3, I wrote 0, as I have already included my spouse beforehand. And questions 4 through 7 do not apply to us, so I typed in 0. Question 8 asks add together items number 1 through 7. So the total household size is 2, and it should be for you too if you're in a similar situation to us. Part 6 asks for the sponsor's employment and income. So that would be the petitioner's employment and income. So for question 1, I checked the box employed as a, and I inserted my role here. For question 2, I wrote the name of my employer. I left question 3 blank and question 4 blank, as I am not self-employed and I do have an employer. For questions 5 and 6, I wrote NA, as I'm not retired or unemployed. And then for question 7, I put my annual income. Now, everyone's circumstances are different, but we meet the federal poverty guidelines for income requirements. So we don't need a joint sponsor, and I'm able to financially support my husband, beneficiary, without any additional support. So therefore, as it's only my income that we're using, then on the next page for questions 8, 9, 10, and 11, we wrote NA. Once again, for question 12, it calculates the total annual household income. So in our case, that was just the number as above that we entered in question 7. So for question 12, that's my income as a whole. Question 13 and 14 did not apply to us. Question 15 asks, have you filed a federal income tax return for each of the 3 most recent tax years? So I checked yes, as I am a W-2 employee and I do have an employer. The instructions say that you must attach a photocopy or transcript of your federal income tax returns for the most recent tax year and complete question 16A. In our case, just to be thorough, we actually provided the tax information for the most recent 3 years. The instructions do state that if you believe additional returns may help you establish your ability to maintain sufficient income, you may submit transcripts or photocopies of your federal income tax returns for the 3 most recent years and complete items numbers 16A through 16C. So we in 16A to 16C included the total income as listed on the IRS tax return. To get your IRS tax transcript, you'll log on to irs.gov. On the home page, you'll click Sign into your account. You're going to select Individual, Sign into Online Account. You can either create a new account or sign into an existing one. Once signed in, you'll go on to the Records section and click on View Tax Records. You'll then hit the Get Transcripts Online button. In the drop-down box that asks you to select a reason, you can choose Immigration. And for the customer file number, you can leave that blank and hit Go. And then you can select your transcript from the Return Transcript section. Once you click on one of the years, you can either print or download these forms. We then left question 17 intentionally blank. The next little section is for USCIS only. Part 7 asks if your income or the total income for you and your household from Part 6 exceeds the federal poverty guidelines for your household size, you are not required to complete this part. So we can skip to the next part. So as you can see, we just wrote NA for the fields 1 through 5 as we met the poverty guidelines, and I'm able to financially support my husband without a joint sponsor or any additional assistance. Of course, your case may vary, so your form may look a little different, and you would just need to adjust that accordingly to your income needs. On page 8, as you can see, we added NA as this does not apply to us. Part 8 starts stating some information regarding the I-864 contract and continues throughout page 9. And then on page 10, it asks for the sponsor's acknowledgement. So we checked box 1A, that I can read and understand English and that I have read and understood every question and instruction on this affidavit. For 1B, I just put NA, as we didn't use an interpreter, and the same for question 2. Question 3 and 4 asked for my contact number, and then for question 5, I wrote down my email address. At the bottom of page 10, it asked for my signature, i.e. the U.S. petitioner. So once again, remember to print out this form and fill out the signature by hand, as USCIS does not accept typed signatures. And if you haven't signed this form, they will reject your application. Then, next to the signature, I wrote today's date. For part 9, it asks, similar to the previous forms, for the interpreter's information. So as we didn't use an interpreter, we just wrote NA for everything. And as we didn't use a preparer, we also wrote NA for that. The final page is part 11, for additional information if you needed additional space. We didn't need any additional space, but just remember to fill in question 1 with your name, as it is still part of the form, and you need to submit it along with your application, even if you didn't use the spaces. Now we will move on to the supporting evidence required for this form. We included 1040s for the past 3 years, 2024, 2023, and 2022. On each page, we wrote the petitioner's name, the applicant's name, and a number, and titled the form even though it's clearly visible that it's the 1040 tax return. Next, we included the IRS tax transcripts for the past 3 years and labeled each document accordingly. We then included W-2s for the past 3 years. The next document was a letter from my employer verifying my employment that states my position, salary, hire date, and employee status. We tried to provide as much information and documentation as we could, as we wanted to avoid receiving a request for evidence. So we found it better to include as much relevant information as we could, rather than solely include the bare minimum. We then included pay stubs from the past 6 months. Then we included a letter from my bank stating the opening date of the account, total amount deposited, and also the present balance. We included the petitioner's passport biographic page, and titled it Proof of U.S. Sponsors U.S. Citizenship. Our aim was to just make sure everything was as easy as possible for USCIS to read and acknowledge. I also included a copy of my birth certificate too. Next, we included a couple of additional documents to support our overall adjustment of status packet, which is mainly just proof of your relationship. Again, this section is included in the same packet and just a continuation of pages of paper in one big pile of paper. We haven't separated these into different envelopes or folders, as every piece of documentation is relevant to the adjustment of status packet. As you can see, we included photos of our wedding day, once again including a title, stating a description, plus the date of the marriage. We also again have continued to label every page with the applicant's name and a number. We then included our joint lease for our apartment. You may not have this specifically, so use this just as a guideline of things that you could include as proof of a genuine marriage. However, we decided to include a joint apartment lease, which has both of our names on it. We then included a statement from our joint bank account, and you could get a joint bank account or be added to your sponsor's bank account. USCIS is looking for proof that you have a genuine relationship and marriage, and we wanted to include more evidence than just a marriage certificate, as we felt the chance of being approved would be greater with more concrete evidence of a genuine relationship. Next, we included a good number of photos of our relationship from various months, labeling the date and description of each, similar to as what we have submitted for our I-129F K-1 visa packet. We included around 20 pages of photos. Similarly, we included proof of our travels together, such as boarding passes and travel receipts. Once again, you can really include anything relevant to your situation to show USCIS that you have a genuine marriage and relationship. And that is all you need for the adjustment of status side of things that you need to submit to USCIS. If you'd like to see how to mail it off to USCIS, then skip towards the end of the video. However, I'll briefly run through how to concurrently file and assemble the optional I-765 form for work authorization and I-131 form for travel authorization while your adjustment of status green card application is processing. As there is no specific timeline or tool to predict for your green card to be approved, you can apply to be able to work in the USA as well as travel and enter back into the USA before your green card is processed. This is just optional and you don't have to submit this form, which is why I thought I'd briefly just touch upon this. Again, as you can see, we created a title cover page just stating the name of the form, as well as including the applicant's name and a number. Similarly, we included a cover letter for this form. Most importantly, we emphasized that we were filing the I-765 application for employment authorization concurrently with Form I-485, as this meant that the filing fee would be $260 instead of the full price. We included the contents of this packet as they appear in the order in which they'll appear, and I'll run through this now. We included another G1145 form, which allows e-notifications from USCIS that the form has been received. Next is the actual I-765 form. This is primarily filled out by the beneficiary applicant. I can create a tutorial as to how to fill out this form specifically, but for now, I'll just run through what you're going to need to include with these forms as supplementary documents, as they are very much the same documents for adjustment of status. The first page after the form is a copy of the applicant's passport biographic page. Again, we included a title, the applicant's name, as well as his A number. You'll see a lot of documents we're including are very repetitive, so you can just print out multiple copies of certain items should you wish to. Then you'll need to include a copy of the applicant's birth certificate. We then included my husband's Social Security card. Of course, you may not have applied for this yet, so you don't need to include this if you haven't. Next is a copy of his I-94 record of entering on a K-1 visa. And then a copy of his K-1 visa with the stamp of admission. Next, we included a copy of our NOAA 2, and then a copy of our NOAA 1. Then we added our K-1 FTP NVC letter. And finally, we included another certified copy of our marriage certificate. So that's the I-765 form supplementary documents. And with that form submitted, you should gain authorization to work in the USA before your green card arrives. Once again, this is just optional and you don't have to submit this form, which is why I thought I'd briefly just touch upon this. The last application is Form I-131, which again is optional. And this allows you to travel out of the USA and enter back in. The filing fee for this form is $630, so you may choose not to file for this. And again, this is its own individual form, but requires a lot of the same information as filled out previously. As previously, we've assembled a simple title page. We then included another cover letter for this form, stating the name of the form we're applying for, as well as the supporting documents we're including along with this filing. Once again, we have another G1145, so we can receive e-notifications from USCIS that the form has been received. Next is the I-131 form. Again, I can create a tutorial as to how to fill out this form specifically, but I thought I'd just run through what you're going to need to include with these forms as supplementary documents, as once again, they repeat a lot. First, we have a copy of the applicant's passport biographic page. Next is a copy of my husband's birth certificate. Then we included his Social Security card. Next is his I-94 admission record on a K-1 visa. We then included a copy of his K-1 visa with the stamp of admission. We added our NOAA 2. We added our NOAA 1. And we added our K-1 FTP NVC letter 2. Finally, we added another certified copy of our marriage certificate. We did additionally include an overall cover letter, which we put at the very, very top of our packet, And this was just to act as an introduction to the USCIS to say that this is our original submission of the Adjustment of Status application, and that we are filing other forms concurrently along with it. We also mention the location and date of the airport which we entered and when we married. But you only need this cover letter if you're filing all 3 forms concurrently. I decided to create a checklist that you can use as a reference to make sure you've included everything into your packet. These are the documents we submitted, however, your case may be different. So for instance, if you've been married before, you'll be required to submit proof that any previous marriages have been terminated by including a divorce certificate or an annulment certificate. Similarly, if you've had any criminal offenses, you'll need to provide certified copies of all court and police records indicating this. Let me walk you through how to include the filing fees for the submission. You can make payments to USCIS by credit card payment. However, we decided to use checks, as from our research, a lot of people were getting denied due to the bank thinking it was fraudulent transaction, thus resulting in USCIS sending back people's applications, saying the payment was declined, leading to a further delay in processing. USCIS was very specific in their guidelines on how to write out the check, so I'll show you how we wrote ours out. For the I-485 application, you're going to write today's date and write the month, day, and year in this format. It should be made payable to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. This check should be written out for $1,440.00 in numerical form, along with the wording as displayed on the screen. In the memo section, you should include the name of the application form you're submitting. So in this case, it's the I-485 form. You should add the applicant's name and a number 2. And then this check should be signed. If you're filing just the I-485 form, then that's the only check you need to submit. However, if you're filing for work and travel authorization, then the next check for the I-765 application should be written in exactly the same format, however, should be made payable to the amount of $260.00, and this fee is due to you filing concurrently with the I-485 form. The third check for the I-131 application should be made payable to the amount of $630.00. These checks should be placed on top of each corresponding application. In addition, each document should include 2 passport photos of the applicant, i.e. the beneficiary. On the back of each photo, we wrote my husband's name and a number lightly in pencil, and put the pair of photos in 3 separate Ziploc bags to avoid them getting lost or damaged. We clipped both the check and the photo to the top of the application. As you can see, we assembled our packet into 3 documents which we submitted together as one large document. We didn't use separate folders or create anything fancy with different folders. We just wanted to keep our packet as simple as possible for USCIS, and therefore printed title pages and used easily removable binder clips. Each document packet does include a check made payable to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and 2 passport photos of the applicant. We then put all these documents into one big envelope and mailed it to USCIS via USPS. To locate where you should send your Adjustment of Status packet depends on which state you're located in. To find out where to mail your application, you're going to go onto the USCIS website and find the lockbox filing location chart for family-based forms. So for example, we mailed our form via USPS to the Chicago lockbox because we're based in Florida. It cost us approximately $15 to mail this off via USPS. I thought I'd mention some useful tips that may help you. Before filing this form, you will need certified copies of your marriage certificate. So I do recommend obtaining a few copies, as this will always be useful for other tasks such as changing your name or opening up joint bank accounts. It is also worthwhile getting a social security card and number once you've entered the USA. So you can begin applying for US bank cards, getting your driver's license, get health insurance, and open any other relevant accounts. Plus, you're then able to include your social security number on these forms. Otherwise, you're reliant on USCIS to review your application before a social security card can be issued. I would recommend starting to fill out these forms as soon as possible, even if you haven't entered the US yet, as it's always worthwhile drafting a copy, as it's a lot to fill out. We started filling out our forms before we were married and left post-it notes on the pages to fill out once we had the relevant information, such as my husband's I-94 arrival record number. I would print out multiple copies of some items, such as the G1145 e-notification form, or a few copies of the I-94 arrival document, as a lot of the documents needed are repeated for all three applications. However, you will need to submit multiple copies of the supporting evidence, as the 3 different applications may be looked at by 3 different people. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and hopefully I managed to cover most of the adjustment of status submission. Again, this is how we submitted our application, and some aspects may differ based on your circumstances, but I hope it gives you some guidance. As always, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them.